Hi everyone, and thank you for being here. This presentation is the outcome of collaborative studio between University of Navarra and School of Art and Architecture, Sushant University. In this studio, we explored the potential of AI and VR technologies to reimagine and re-engage with urban villages, spaces that are deeply layered yet largely overlooked. Moving on to our studio agenda, before dividing into the site, we asked ourselves a bigger question. How do we make sense of urban villages as systems that are deeply historic yet constantly evolving? Our process was designed around five key phases. First, we grounded ourselves in understanding what urban villages really are beyond their informal appearances. We started by mapping their identity and structure and then moved on to a deep on ground documentation. From there, we explored how technology, specifically VR and AI, could help simulate change, visualize potential futures, and test ideas. Our final step was to ground these ideas in policy and come up with a set of interventions that respect the complexity of these places while offering a new vision for development, not through erasure, but through revival. Our team consists of 13 students led by Professor Himanshu Sanghani. Our collaboration with UNAV brought together different skills, interests, and backgrounds together. Talking of the premise, urban villages in India are often dismissed as transitional or leftover spaces. But what if we saw them as resilient ecosystems, dense, adaptive, and deeply rooted in heritage? Fatehpur Beri challenges the idea that informality equals failure. It operates outside formal planning, yet reveals its own logic and structure. This shift in perspective shaped our four core themes, which were urban villages as living heritage evolving daily, incremental revival over clearance, strengthening what's present rather than replacing it, AI and VR as thinking tools to map identity and simulate futures, and grounded design through data and empathy, where analytics and supportive, inclusive context sensitive interventions are done. Then we decoded our site and conducted a comprehensive analysis covering various parameters to understand the village better. Now, talking of Fatehpur Beri, it was a site that was selected, located in Asola Wildlife Sanctuary in Delhi. It's a part of Zone J under Bhatti Ward as per Delhi's master plan. Talking of its municipal boundary, to situate Fatehpur Beri administratively, it falls under the South Delhi Municipal Corporation, specifically within the Mehroli subdivision. As you can see on the map, it sits close to the edge of the southern ridge, with Papa Meena and Patwari directly responsible for the area. This is to also highlight how governance here is fragmented and led, involving multiple jurisdictions. That complexity plays a big role in why urban villages like Fatehpur often fall through the cracks when it comes to infrastructure and development policy. Historically known as the village of warriors, Fatehpur Beri earned international recognition as the birthplace of India's modern bouncers. Now, with growing media attention, there are proposals for development like a girls' college as well. And now the village stands at a cultural crossroad, almost under a threat amidst this urbanization. In many ways, this slide also sets the tone that Fatehpur Beri is not static. It's negotiating its identity every day. And our interventions needed to speak directly to that ongoing evolution. Talking of the demographics, Fatehpur Beri has a current estimated population of around 12,700 people spread across just 1,600 households. That density already gives you a sense of how tightly packed and active this village is. Also, children under 6 are making up over 14% of the population, waiting to be engaged more meaningfully in the village. From an economic lens, overwhelming majority fall under informal and unorganized sectors which need to address not just through infrastructure, but also through programs that build dignity, access, and opportunity. At site, commerce is thriving at small scales like grocery shops, salons, nutrition stores. And for medium scale enterprises, they include car workshops, fabricators. So there is a potential for scaling through skill incubation. Moving on to the figure ground map, with over 90% built up area, Fatehpur Beri is extremely dense. There is limited breathing space, making intervention through open space recovery critical. Now, talking of the spatial character, we identified three typical nodes, as you can see in the key plan, the first node is from the primary artery onto the secondary artery, and you see a commercial street forming across the primary artery. In node 2, you see a cross junction which has commercial aspects housed on all four corners of the node. And in node 3, you see a landmark which makes a commercial zone prominent within the fabric. Now moving on. Now, the road network is largely organic, dominated by narrow tertiary roads. Lack of pedestrian pathways, undefined right-of-ways, and congestion make mobility a key area of intervention. The next slide also shows the right-of-way as low as 2.6 meters with open drainage, as you can see on the right side. Moving on to the landmarks, you see that on the periphery, we have farmhouses and banquet halls mapped out. And as you go further in, you also see certain political party houses in the fabric. And further deep into the fabric, you see decentralized mandirs all across the fabric. Now, moving on to the next slide. So what we observe here is that the primary spine is where the traffic is most prominent and busy in the evenings and around the market days, which are Mondays and Thursdays. You also see the major traffic nodes mapped out here, and the traffic dissipates further as we go deeper into the fabric. Moving on to the next slide. The site's land use is diverse but fragmented. Residential, commercial, and green areas coexist, yet without synergy. This fragmentation further fuels inefficient growth. Talking of the topography, the site lies on an undulating terrain within the southern ridge. This makes natural drainage important, yet it's been largely ignored in the built expansion. Talking of the power infrastructure, despite proximity to major substations, Fatehpur Beri experiences energy instability, especially during monsoon. Infrastructure doesn't match consumption patterns. Talking of the water supply, water scarcity is a major concern here. With Mehrauli receiving just 29 liters per capita per day, Fatehpur Beri is likely in a semi-critical water zone. Talking of the groundwater levels, they are overexploited. Without rainwater harvesting or bund renovation, this trend will only worsen. The Fatehpur Beri Bund was meant to impound rainwater, but now suffers from poor maintenance. Its revival could be key to ecological restoration and flood mitigation. Talking of waterlogging and drainage, it's severely mismanaged. Open drains lead to waterlogging, and authorities as of now lack coordination. This creates health hazards and impedes daily life. Talking of the public transport of Fatehpur Beri, as of now, it's poorly served by public transit. Streets are narrow, and last-mile connectivity is informal. Accessibility to women, elderly, and children is minimal. Looking at education, basic education is available, but there are no higher education campuses within the village. This leads to out-migration and limits youth opportunities as of now. Looking at healthcare, there is only one government clinic and limited private options. No inpatient care or emergency services exist locally, making this a health risk zone. Talking of community and cultural centers, while temples serve as social hubs, there are no formal community centers or libraries. There is a civic gap in the infrastructure for inclusive engagement for the community. We've also mapped out the existing social infrastructure here, which only highlights a significant shortage for public spaces and engagement.
Moving on, we've moved on to the design process and the process that our studio undertook to deal with the interventions. First, we decided to work in two parallel tracks, which is the site analysis and problem identification, and then the spatial strategy and development. So under site analysis and problem identification, we first finalized on the site of Fatehpur Beri, then went on site to document it, which you saw earlier. And then based on the identification of the issues, we sorted them into spatial level problems and policy level problems. After this process, we came to the spatial strategy development, where we discussed and came up with different strategies to deal with each of these issues, and then undertook a visualization process aided through VR and AI. So what we did was we modeled our context and interventions in SketchUp. Then we took it into different AI rendering softwares to see the comparative of the different softwares and what they suggest. Then once we went back into the SketchUp model and made certain changes, We took it to V-Ray and exported a 360-degree panoramic view, which we rendered with AI to go see the entire intervention in a VR. After doing this, we found out certain changes that needed making, made those changes and took it into D5 rendering. Using the AI post-processing software of D5, we arose to our final conclusions. So here is the hierarchical identification of the problems. We have divided them into phase 1 and phase 2. The phase 1 issues were more critical, while phase 2 deal with more infrastructure issues that can be paced out over the course of the... So the first issue is that of social disintegration. There is a very fragmented and weak fabric that leads to a very individualized community because there is a strong lack of community spaces. The second major issue is the lack of inclusive play spaces for children. There is no safe areas for children to sit and play. We observed on site that the children were on motorized roads, but just sitting down and playing, waiting for opportunities where the cars would move by so they could resume. But not only the children feel the need for a safe space where they can go play, it's also a concern of the parents who say that they will refuse to send their children out and haven't been doing so because of the lack of safety. The problem 3 is that of identity loss. As mentioned earlier, Fatehpur Beri was known as the village of warriors, and that was a very strong identity. But this has slowly been disappearing over the course of the years. This is a very pressing issue that needs to be addressed with immediacy. And the last is that of physical infrastructure, and there being a lack of paratransit and pedestrian forward areas to connect the different landmarks and areas in the site. Here we have synthesized all the problems and developed key objectives from each of them to tackle these situations. The structure plan highlights the different nodes, the intervention areas, and the larger urban project that we're looking at. Delving into the design vocabulary, we set these as parameters for ourselves to not only bring a cohesive final output, but also to connect the different projects and develop it as a holistic project rather than individual interventions, and also to guide our spatial interventions. We did this through planes and projection, edges and nodes, modules and pixels, and porosity. So here are the different modules we use, which are horizontal, vertical, and connecting. This is how we have, in an amalgamation, represented all the different design vocabularies that needed to be present to generate a cohesive output. Coming to the master plan, this is a plan view of the entire precinct and the 4 critical areas we are covering. So here you will see, since all of them are connected, it rather than being a fragmented intervention, it becomes a holistic urban project that can provide greater merit to society. So here we have the transient play zone, the social spine, and the akhara, the traditional community center, connected by the pedestrian transit corridor. These are the images from those specific areas. So you will see that there is a lot of potential in the area, but there needs to be some sort of intervention to make it usable. Delving into the first one, which is the activation of the Vijay Cross Road Junction as a social spine that will facilitate community interaction, skill development, and also economic empowerment. So this is the visuals undertaken during the process that I explained earlier. But in terms of programming, we are focusing on 3 different baskets. The first being spatial activation and placemaking, where we are talking about adaptive spill-out courtyards, reclaiming shop front facades, and street-embedded interactive kiosks to activate the spaces in smaller zones. Then community interaction and engagement is a second objective, where we are looking at performance plaza decks, multi-use plazas, and also flexible festive zones, so that during different times of the day, during different times of the year, the functions can be set per the requirement. And the third being skill development and vocations. The co-working markets, the micro-skill incubation zones, and the maker libraries and tool lending stations will all help the economic empowerment and further the commercial nature of this zone. So here are the final images we drew of the D5 rendering and the post-processing that we did. Coming to our second intervention, which was the transient play spaces to cater to children. what we realized was that for this to be effective, there needs to be a decentralized project where we identified key nodes in different schools and placed these nodes adjacent to them. These nodes act as community spaces which bring all the children together, which are then connected through tactical urbanism and projection play walls to create this entire network. But this is also connected to our social spine and other major landmarks to help children move here. The reason why we decided to make a more decentralized plan was because safety is also an issue. And since the schools operate in 2 shifts, there will always be eyes on these play structures, and also help the children who are waiting for the evening class, or the children who've already attended the morning class to wait for their friends after and have something to do in the meantime. The third intervention is to facilitate and solidify the cultural aspect of Fatehpur Beri, which is the akhada. So in doing, we have proposed an akhada that has, again, 3 separate baskets, which are physical training and wellness, youth development and mentorship, and then some micro level of economic benefits. So to do this, we have proposed historical narrative displays, indigenous knowledge archives, and also holistic fitness courtyards that help in reinforcing that wrestler identity of Fatehpur Beri. Then also we have different youth development and mentorship zones where we just have workshops and training zones, and also leadership incubation spaces that not only focus on the wrestling aspect of it, but also holistic youth development. And lastly, we have the microeconomic condition where we have small markets set up in the area so that it becomes not only a space for the people who are using the wrestling facilities, but also others who can come and view it. Coming to our fourth intervention, which is the spine that connects all of the other 3 interventions, which is a safe, accessible paratransit and pedestrian corridor. To do this, we have proposed an elevated walkway above the entire stretch that connects all of our interventions. And this provides not only a safe pedestrian access, but also a viewing deck and spaces to pause while moving through the site. And the lower area underneath the corridor functions as a paratransit corridor for exclusively motorized vehicular movement that increases the vehicular penetration into the site.
This studio became a testing ground for emerging tools like AI and VR in architectural design. Using various AI tools, we rapidly transformed our 3D models into compelling visuals, enhancing early-stage communication and iterations. Though AI struggled with context, scale, and occasionally over-stylized outputs, it accelerated prototyping and freed us to experiment. Building VR skills also sharpened our spatial thinking. Ultimately, these tools didn't design for us, but they expanded how we think, test, and communicate, especially vital in complex informal contexts like Fatehpur Beri. We will now move on to testing our produced outputs in the VR headset. Thank you.
So we began our exploration by integrating the VR visuals directly into the headset. What you will be seeing now is our first workflow, which revolves around 3D static images, rendered and enhanced using a combination of traditional and AI-assisted tools. So this is a 360-degree panoramic view taken from our SketchUp model, rendered through V-Ray. After the base render, we post-process this image using Visoid AI to enhance the materiality, lighting, and depth. You're currently viewing our first intervention located at the Vijay Cross Junction Road, and this is designed to act as a social spine for the neighborhood, addressing the lack of inclusive public spaces. What you're seeing now is an AI-enhanced version of the same space. Notice how textures have been added to surfaces, and there's more visual depth and realism introduced using the AI post-processing. This allowed us to better communicate with the atmosphere we were envisioning for the space. We're still viewing the same intervention, so you can take a moment to observe the material changes and the way AI has played with the lighting, and adding the depth. Now we're moving to the second intervention. This one imagines transient play spaces created for children. This intention here was to ensure both safety and mental well-being while also fostering community engagement. And as you can see, the AI post-processing introduces new elements. For example, play structures, seating, and shaded areas. It also experimented with different material finishes. However, we did observe over stylization in some elements, and this is a known limitation of AI tools like Visoid. Certain materials were misinterpreted, and in some cases, the context of the site is not accurately reflected. But even with these limitations, the process has greatly enhanced our internal design communication, and it has helped us collectively visualize and evaluate our ideas in a more immersive way. We now move on to the third intervention, which is the Akhada, which traditionally serves as a community gathering and performing space. And this is the SketchUp base model rendered with V-Ray without the AI post-processing. It gives a clear view of the design, form, and layout. Now you're seeing the AI enhanced version. So notice that the added greenery, textures, and environmental elements add vibrancy to the image, but it still lacks the true character of the Akhada that we had imagined. Some additions feel generic rather than site specific. Here's an interior view of the Akhada. This perspective allows us to experience the scale and modularity from a human eye level. And that being said, some eye-level perspectives have resulted in unnatural proportions as well, which we have marked as another limitation of this workflow. Now we're looking at an exterior view of the same Akhada from a different angle. And again, the AI has added a lot of vegetation and ambient elements, but it sometimes oversimplifies and misinterprets on the architectural detailing of it. Overall, these were the static images we tested, and while they are not perfect, this workflow gave us a powerful tool for rapid visualization and team discussion. Thank you.